The environment that you surround yourself with gives you what's called value priming and has a massive impact on how you interpret the world around you. We tend to adopt the worldview of the people around us. However, it's much more complicated than just that. The news you consume, the news source you're consuming from, how your algorithm feeds you information, and the ways that you are getting information into your brain through TV, movies, art, other kinds of media, and the books that you're reading all have a huge impact on how you will interpret ambiguous stimuli. What does that mean? We're going to get into it in this episode. So let's get into it. Let's get this started. Welcome into the Modern Creative Woman. I'm Dr. Amy Backos. I am your hostess here as we take a deep dive into the neurobiology of value priming. And then we'll discuss the psychological impact that what we're giving ourselves, how we're feeding ourselves information, can have a positive or a negative impact on us. And finally, I'll give you 3 ways that you can get a hold of the information coming into your head and start to see ambiguous stimuli as ambiguous. In other words, stop making assumptions and start getting clear. This works for the art you're making, the people that you're talking with, the ideas that you're sharing, and how you interpret the news when you read it. Let's start with the basics. Ambiguous stimuli. It means you're perceiving something that could be interpreted in a variety of ways. It might be a sound that is a little bit unclear. Think of songs that you hear one set of lyrics and then later you find out it's actually not at all related. Think of times when you have misunderstood a friend through text, through face-to-face conversation, and later you realize that you were both really on the same page. It was a misunderstanding. And finally, think of art that you truly love that gives you such a good feeling. It might be the same for other people, or it might not. Sometimes people have a positive but neutral feeling about a painting, while other people are so deeply moved by it. All of this relates to value priming. First, let's have a quick look into the neurobiology of it. And I want to talk specifically about how the brain is functioning when we end up in this situation where we're looking at something and interpreting it in a different way than maybe the person next to us. So value priming is really this subconscious, unconscious process where your prior exposure to something alters the decisions that you're making as they come to you. And it's often associated with a reward circuit. We are rewarded by interpreting something in a certain way. If you're an optimist, you interpret things in a really positive way. If you're a pessimist, you may see things in a way that is looking for the negative. It is always seeing situations with a degree of suspicion. The neuropsychology of this relates to value priming in the following ways. The neural circuitry is related to 3 different things. And the first one I want you to know about is the dopaminergic pathway. Dopamine, you know what that is. It helps you feel good. And it has a huge impact on how we decide to interpret the world. The next one is the striatum, and it is also related to rewards. It processes the anticipated reward, and it's really reinforcing these kind of conditional triggers. Oh, if I see it this way, then I will be rewarded by feeling better, or my anxiety will lower if I find myself being able to understand something in a familiar way. Dopamine is related to that, and it's really adjusting your sensitivity to how much you're going to feel that reward. If you have consistently been rewarded for being an optimist, for seeing the best in people, and the more you look for positive things in people, the more you find them. You are thinking like Mr. Rogers taught us to think, to always look for the helpers, to always look for ways that we can connect with other people. instead of looking always at the crisis or always looking at ways that we are not connected to people. So the striatum and the dopamine pathway are really about feeling good, pleasure, satisfied, rewarded when we see the world a certain way. And then the third aspect of our neural circuitry is the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, essentially the front part of your brain. And that's where we're encoding these really subjective values, and we're dealing with the reward circuits. So all three of these areas in our brain are involved in value priming. And when we are value priming, it impacts all the things that we see and do and how we respond. We first respond to the value prime, then we respond to the other things happening around us. Now that you know where this is happening in your brain, let's get down to the nitty-gritty with value priming. It is a phenomenon in which exposure to one stimulus influences how you respond to future stimulus that's related. In other words, you are exposed to something and then it influences your future behavior. This is really easily seen in language. So psychologists over and over are exploring how taking in particular language will influence how quickly we can respond to related language. So if you're primed with words that rhyme, like boat and goat, and then you're exposed to a list of words, you will most easily find and remember words that rhyme with those two words, like moat or promote. It makes sense, right? Think about children's nursery rhymes, where you start to be able to predict. There's a familiar pattern happening. Anything that rhymes allows this nice feeling. You're able to predict something that's happening. It influences the speed at which you're able to categorize letters. Psychologists have looked at words or a series of letters that don't make up words. And for example, the moment after a person sees the word doctor, the faster they can recognize the word nurse. And they're able to recognize these kind of peripherally related words, doctor, nurse, much faster than they can recognize words like cat, because the medical concept has been primed. Doctor, nurse, rather than Dr. Cat. The priming process really occurs when our mental representation of these concepts really are being activated by our exposure to something that they're related to. So if you have a certain belief about how the world works, most people are pretty nice, you're going to see things that support that. If you have a concept that the world is a scary place, there's so much to be scared of, you will more quickly recognize scenarios that go along with your previous belief that the world is a scary place. I'm talking with you about individual aspects for value priming. And I want to also recognize that there is social priming. And this is in the area of sociology or social work, the idea of how groups function. And so psychologists have looked at how priming can have these really surprising effects on our behavior as well. They've found that seeing images of money can affect our political views. Reading words associated with elderly have been found to make people move at actually a different speed. So if you come to understand your age is a certain way, then you will respond accordingly. There is perhaps less research on these kinds of social priming cues that cause us to act in a consistent behavioral way, but there's so much more research related to value priming about our personal psychology. And what we expect to see will be, in fact, what we often do see. Here are some examples of how you've probably already used value priming to make something more meaningful to you. It's a wonderful suggestion when meeting new people to say that person's name out loud, such as Michelle. They say their name. I say, "Hello, Michelle, so nice to meet you," and try and work her name into the conversation a little bit later on. But how do you remember from that first time to 10 minutes later? Well, neuropsychology has some suggestions for you. If you start to play around with someone's name and associate it to something that you already like, you're in luck. So, Michelle, 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 saying it 5 times, then making a rhyme or connecting it to a song you know. Michelle, my bell. Michelle, my bell is a song. You can end up in this really amazing space where the name is now linked with something else in your head. And then you see Michelle later at the party and you say, "Oh, Michelle, my bell." Okay, hello, Michelle. Nice to see you again. You use this already when you make up nicknames for your dog or your kids. Michelle, my bell is something I say about my friend Michelle. In my head, I think of her fondly and I added the little rhyme to it. You do it with your dog where you make up little nicknames. So you're pairing your dog's name with pleasant sounds in your head with the act of singing those songs. And most people I know with pets have little nicknames for their pets. We do the same with our children. Often people will associate their child with a little animal. When they're on the playground, they swing like a monkey on the jungle gym. We pair naturally, and it gives us more associations to our child. The more associations we have to it, the playground, the jungle gym, and our child, the stronger we are connected to our child. So it works with people we already care about, and it works with people that you're meeting for the first time, where you start to pair things. Anytime you rhyme will help. Another thing that neuropsychology teaches for priming is if you meet someone, you can consider who else you know by that same name. When I met my neighbor, it was easy for me to remember his name because his name is the same as my brother. So when I met him, I said, "Hello, how are you?" Said his name, and I even said, "That's my brother's name." It gives you the chance to make stronger neural connections. I talk to a lot of people that feel like they struggle with remembering faces or remembering names. And so these value priming strategies that we're already using in other areas can be easily applied in our business and social situations. My second set of recommendations is self-talk. So we prime ourselves to think positive thoughts. First thing I say every morning, I think I've probably told it to you here before, today is the happiest day of my life. I also say thank you when I put my feet on the ground. It primes me to start my day off with happy thoughts and with gratitude. And to put that into my brain when it's sort of most open, in that state between sleeping and waking, you're very easily influenced, which is why you don't want to pick up your phone. So in that moment, what do you want to say to yourself? How do you want to say the day is going to go? I have lots of little sayings where I'm talking to myself. At the end of every workout, I say, "Good job, Amy." If I am moving particularly slow on a project, I say, "The faster I run, the sooner I'm done." And it allows me to pick up my pace. I, left to my own devices, will be leisurely on almost everything. And so there are time-sensitive things that I need to do. So the faster I run, the sooner I'm done is a funny little rhyme. It's cheerful. I like it. It gets me moving a little faster. I would love to hear how your self-talk goes. We cannot unlearn these negative self-talk associations that many, most, or all of us have been telling ourselves since childhood. So the negative "I'm not good enough" story has probably been repeated in our heads millions of times. It is a very strong value prime. Now, while we can't quote unquote unlearn something, we can overwrite the coding by adding new things in. So good job, followed by your name, is learning to override some of those systems, that allowing negative self-talk to fade into the background as it's replaced by a stronger value prime of good job, reinforcement, pleasure, and feeling pride at the end of whatever you've done and accomplished. Our inability to unlearn something can feel really frustrating, especially when we're trying to change certain habits. It's also frustrating for people who've experienced traumas and are starting to associate more and more things with their traumatic experience. It becomes increasingly difficult to not associate things with the trauma. However, part of what art does is start to tease apart those associations and give people their power back. So you can start doing this yourself when you hear that negative story, the "I'm not good enough" story, the reminder of maybe some embarrassment thing that happened, or the reminder of a trauma. You can start to add in a new value prime situation. Here's what it requires: rehearsal in advance. So it means we have to practice daily. In advance of the "I'm not good enough" story showing up, we need to talk to ourselves. Say, "Good job, well done, I like this, I look nice today, this is a big accomplishment for me, I'm proud of myself." We really do need to practice these. Now, affirmations in and of themselves are not going to solve our problems. However, the more we rehearse just a couple of them, and we're not listening to affirmations all day long or looking at 100 different ones, we choose one that we really like, get it into our mind, and then we can see how it can start to become more automatic. At the end of every workout, it just comes out of my mouth, "Good job, Amy." It took, a year to do that. But over and over, the more I did it, the more pride I felt at the end of every workout. So wherever you notice, start with something small, a small place where you need a little reinforcement. If you are checking your outfit in the morning and you have an automatic negative thought about yourself, your style, your body, find an idea there, a new way of thinking of it. "I look nice today. I'm proud of myself. I like that my body carries me around." Whatever it is that you can add in, for a while, it will be the afterthought. You'll have the negative thought and you'll have to kind of consciously remind yourself, "Oh, I'm proud of my body." And then over time, the "I'm proud of my body" will start to gather some momentum and some steam. And eventually, you'll start to be value primed for "I'm proud of my body." And you'll find yourself saying it more and more places. Here's another example, using what I said about the faster I run, the sooner I'm done. Many women that I work with end up like doing a confession where they feel like they're a procrastinator and something's wrong with them for how they don't take action on things right away. Now, most of the time, upon digging through these statements, they're just repeated, some teacher told them that in third grade or something. They're repeated, and they're often just simply untrue. So we look for these examples where it is untrue. Now, procrastination can be a symptom of attention challenges. It can be a symptom of anxiety. The idea works the same regardless of if it's an old story, if it's related to anxiety or attention. Giving yourself the rewrite, the other thoughts, can help you change how you perceive the way you spend time. Replace being lazy with I am luxuriating today. I am resting on the couch, and resting is important. I am enjoying music or I'm dancing is pleasure. It's enjoyable. And we don't have to fill every single moment with capitalist productivity goals. That dancing becomes, oh, I love moving my body joyfully. Dancing keeps my memory strong, keeps my joints strong. And you recognize what you're doing for what it is. And you're responding to what's happening in the moment, dancing or resting, reading, whatever it is that you're doing that's not what you want it to be productivity-wise. And call it for what it is instead of assigning a judgment to it. So in many women's minds, rest has become associated with lazy, and women often struggle to rest. There's lots of reasons externally why that is the case. However, we can change how we respond to it internally. I am luxuriating. I set my timer for 10 minutes to rest. Is totally different than, oh my gosh, I'm so lazy. What's wrong with me? Why can't I motivate? It's the same activity, sitting on the couch, with two completely different descriptions of what's happening. One description, I'm lazy, what's wrong with me, makes you feel worse. The other description, I am luxuriating and having some well-earned rest, gives you a sense of relaxation. It allows you to actually rest without adding guilt or shame on top of it. I really want to make sure that you understand this last piece. Naming and responding to what's happening instead of responding to internal judgment gives you a whole new mastery over value priming. When you talk to yourself about rest, I am luxuriating, I am taking a break because I know that allows my brain to get stronger and become refreshed, is totally different than taking a break and thinking terrible thoughts and judgmental thoughts about what's wrong with me, why am I quote unquote lazy. Noticing what's happening in the current moment and value priming towards why that's beneficial will give you so much more ease and allow you to respond with much more compassion towards yourself instead of responding with these value primed negative associations that so many women often feel when they try to take a rest. Now let's talk about art. In art, value priming works the same way. And what researchers have noticed, the more you're exposed to art, the more you will start to enjoy it. And this works on an individual level, piece by piece of art, or a genre of art. I talked last week about the abstract expressionist art. The more I look at abstract expressionism, the more I love it. And then the more I seek it out. Remember, we can respond with dislike to art. We can respond neutrally. We can respond with some kind of pleasure. And then there's the art that truly moves us and is amazing. We're really enriched and we feel incredible. And the brain responds, the body responds. We feel so good when we see art that lights us up. And it's really different for everyone. Most of the research suggests figurative art is just kind of the general preference. But it's maybe not for you. It's not for me. And the more you look at and explore what you like to see, the more opportunities you will have to feel good in the artistic experience. I want to leave you with an idea. Every time you find yourself in a situation of frustration or of pleasure, of strong emotion, or anytime something feels just intense in some way, I want you to narrow it down to one word to describe what's happening. Here's how I've applied it, and it really has helped me feel engaged and in the present moment. So if I'm feeling frustrated, talking with my son, we're getting ready for college, there's so much to do. When I'm feeling frustrated with that, I just narrow it down. Parenting. That's all I'm doing. I'm parenting. And it's a reminder, how do I want to parent? I want to be patient. I want to be kind. I want to be supportive. I want to help him figure out all these details. So just naming what I'm doing. I'm parenting. Oh, okay. I know how to parent. Let's do this. The next example relates to an emotion. Simply naming an emotion that you're experiencing has a huge impact on us. It gives our brain some recognition, and it allows our brain to then feel like there's a story here, or that we're in control of something that's going on. So you might say happy, sad, scared, frustrated, pleasure, ambiguity, confusion. All of these, once we name them, we're in a much better position to respond to them, respond to the situation, instead of this old value priming that often shows up for us. And finally, if you are considering how you might take a next step, you can name what you're doing. I'm considering. I'm unsure. I want another moment to reflect on this. Let me get back to you. Just allowing yourself time to consider without reacting to the pressure to respond in that exact moment can free you up so much. Value priming can look like triggers in the case of trauma, can look like we're getting our buttons pushed in the case of frustration. And we can slow that process down by simply saying, considering, time, pause. Naming all of these things has a huge impact on you. And finally, if you are making art and you are being critical of yourself in that process, you're judging your art, you're having the I'm not good enough story, just say what you're doing. Painting, drawing, photography. Naming what's happening kind of refreshes. It's like a little bit of a soft reset on the old value prime story by anchoring you right back into the present moment. Let me know how this works for you. I would love to hear how you've used this kind of technique yourself or where you can apply it going forward. Thank you so much for joining me here today on the Modern Creative Woman podcast. I hope you have a really strong sense now of what value priming is. We looked at the neural circuitry and the neurobiology of how this happens in our brain. The dopaminergic pathway, the striatum, the ventromedial prefrontal cortex is where all of this happens. We looked at what exactly is priming, where we have that phenomenon where exposure to one stimulus influences our future responses to other things. And then we talked about how these old stories, these old value prime stories, can get in the way. I gave you a variety of techniques that you can use to create new value prime opportunities and how to reset when you recognize your own frustration or that a value primed story has gotten in the way. And being able to return to the present moment is where all your power lies. So now that you know all of this about value priming and how it relates to art and creativity and thinking and social life, and how you feel and how you parent and how you respond in any situation, now what will you create? Please share with a friend. This is how we make the pod grow. If you have a chance, give a 5-star review, make a few comments. That bumps it up in being promoted on the different podcast platforms, and I would really appreciate that. The more we work together to be creative, the better our lives and the world can get. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I look forward to speaking with you in the next episode.